It's a really special opportunity to hear Ionat talk about her work. She's an artist who's pioneering research in wet biology art practices. She's exhibited and published her work internationally as part of the Tissue, Culture and Art project. She's also the academic coordinator of Symbiotica, the Art and Science Collaborative Research Laboratory, which is based at the School of Anatomy and Human Biology in the University of Western Australia. And Symbiotica is dedicated to the artistic exploration of scientific knowledge, so biotechnologies in particular. And it's the very first research lab that brings together artists and allows them to critically engage with wet biology practices in a biological science department. So thanks very much, Ionat, and I'm really excited to hear your talk. Just try your mic again.
Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, good. So we'll turn this presentation and oops, where would it go? Thank you to everyone, to V2, who brought me over here all the way from Australia. That's why I'm a bit jet-lagged. Cool. And also, I would like to apologize for my voice. I've got a cold just before I have to give the presentation. Bad luck. Okay. So this is a presentation about the Tissue Culture and Art project, which is a collaboration between Oron Katz, so you can see over there, and myself, and who was the precursor that led to the establishment of Symbiotica. The reason I put this slide at the beginning is not that you can see us, but our ethos, which is also the ethos of Symbiotica at the moment, is that artists who would like to manipulate life need to do it in a phenomenological way. Hence, they have to get their hands wet. There are a few reasons for that. One is that they should understand all the complexity involved with life and life manipulation. And secondly, they should be implicated. If you are manipulating life, you shouldn't commission another person to do that, or just to do that. You should at least have a bit of, you at least have to get your hands wet a little bit to understand. And okay, why humans lost their fur? We are the naked ape, if you want to look at it this way. The first reason said that we moved from a cooler place toward the savanna, from a warmer place toward the savanna, and we needed actually to cool up. So one of the reasons is that we lost our fur. Another controversial theory talks about the aquatic ape theory, which says that we are different to other apes, and actually we came from the water. And that's one of the reasons that we are naked, that we walk on two rather than four. However, this theory is very controversial. Lately, there is a third theory that says that as the groups of the naked ape got bigger, we couldn't actually groom each other all the time. It became too much to handle. So we had to devise new technologies, such as language. I see language as a technology, as well as, because we couldn't groom all the ticks and other organisms that lived in our fur, became too much to us. So therefore, slowly, we got rid of our fur, also through sexual selection. It means that being naked became a sexually desired thing, and we would get attracted to those naked bodies. I guess it's quite true now, especially with women. We just take our hair all the time. Okay, and I put this slide because that's the only place. It's actually from the Natural Museum in Nantes, in France, and it's the only museum that I actually found a correlation between humans and apes. And what you can see in the human side is actually a skinned anonymous soldier. You can see a mummy And also, it's not a very good picture, but there is a Maori skull. The Maoris used to cut the head and suck out all the, I guess, juicy bits inside and keep the skull. And then we move toward the apes. I think this is very evocative about our understanding of ourselves. And as I'll go on, you'll understand. So what we can see is that clothes, or wearing clothes, is a very ethnocentric thing. No other animal that we know do it. And it was one of the first technologies that removed us from nature. To the extent, and this is from Western Australian newspaper, that in the US, even luxury leather car seats are impregnated with the chemical scent of vinyl. So yeah, we are removed from nature. Okay, again, clothes are, we are technologically dependent animals, and also social dependent. The naked ape position in the social hierarchy is gone through grooming, which is language and clothes. Okay, now I'll talk a bit about tissue engineering. I might go a bit more in depth into it to explain to you how cells actually live in culture. In 1996, Ron Katz, who come from a design background, came with the idea of actually growing custom living surfaces. He was very interested to see if we can actually coat inanimate objects with living surfaces. At that time, also, he came from an ecological design background, and he believed that this is a great idea to actually get away from the consumer throwaway society toward the nurturing, growing society. And, in theory, he was very naive at the time, and he thought, that will be a great idea. We'll have a sofa that will have a skin growing over it. So when it's cold, it actually will hug you. When it will spread apart, and when it's hot, it will hug you. And when it's got infection, you'll sit on it and you'll get that infection, etc., etc. However, this is still in the realm of science fiction. Okay, so then we decided, actually, because there are so many ethical consideration and philosophical consideration that we wanted to ask, because it does question you a lot about life, we decided to actually not work as designers who doing a product to make euros, millions of euros, but rather as artists who make evocative objects. And we decided that we could call those actually tissue engineered construct that I will explain, or an inanimate objects which are covered with living surfaces as semi-living, because they are dependent, they are living and non-living. And an ivy growing over a wall, I guess, is a primitive example of such thing, because it's not just aesthetically and visually pleasing, it also enriched the air with oxygen, it cools the area, so it has a functional aspect to it. But we decided to look actually at cells, living cells from complex organisms. Okay, let me go through the history of partial life, through the history of how we not just been able to grow cells outside of the body, but also the whole change of perception that led us to understand that we are actually composites of cells, and parts of us can grow outside of ourselves independently to us. One of the pioneers, the pioneer of tissue culture is Alexis Carrel, the one on the right. And the one on the left is the American hero Lindbergh, who was the aviator in the States. And they were the first one. Well, Alexis Carrel was the first one that actually managed to sustain alive and grow cells in culture outside of the body. For that, he needed to actually create what we call a techno-scientific body. He needed to create some system that will enable the cells to grow in and that imitate the body condition. Now, we all talk about body here. And I think all of you think, when you say body, you think about human body. And when we say body, we think about or, bodies of other animals as well. We don't want to be species, because when you work with cells, you realize that the difference between human cells and animal cells is not that big, and they can actually grow well together in culture. Okay, so Alexis Carrel, the pioneer of tissue culture, Nobel Prize for Medicine, and Lindenberg created this perfusion pump that enable the growth of organs, or maintaining the organs outside of the body. Both of them eugenicists, Vichy collaborators, and all those things. So you are asking whether the engagement with partial life, and that's what Ron and I are asking, actually leads toward eugenics, or vice versa. We have to be careful. This is another example. Shortly after in Europe, so not the American version, but the European, a woman on her fell in England, who actually has a completely new, reaction to the idea of actually growing cells outside of the body. She used to go to seminars like that, buy a sausage, a fresh sausage from the market, and do a demonstration when she would take viable cells out of it and show that they can still alive. And what she wanted to say is that when we think something is dead, when we see meat in the butcher, it actually still have life into it, cells that can grow and proliferate theoretically forever. So the animal we still use cells that, from one mouse, for example, that died in the, I would say, early 50s, and there are lots of cells, tons of cells of that specific mouse everywhere in laboratories around the world. She also coined the sentence saying the tissue culture point of view, which is quite ethnocentric again, but she actually encouraged the scientists to think as there are the cells within the culture and what's needed for that, what they need and what's their will and desires, which is a very non-scientific thing to do. Okay, the third shift happened in the 90s, and the picture on the left is from the Time magazine in the early 80s, that we see how we perceived cyborgs then. It had all sorts of mechanical things to enhance the body or fix the body. And this is from the early 90s, the one on the right, and this is actually realizing that the body can repair itself. And we can use the regeneration of our own organs to repair and enhance ourselves. And this is Dr. Vacanti, Joseph Vacanti, and his wife. And he actually made another shift by suggesting, let's not just grow cells in culture. Let's try to construct them in 3D outside of the body and then re-implant them back into the body, what's called neo-organs technologies. And I think, well, besides skin, I think they managed to create bladders, which are quite an easy organs, knee reconstruction, etc. The mouse. He's in charge of that, and he's a scientist or an artist, I'm not really sure, because it's quite an evocative sculpture. Okay, what you see here is actually a mouse that is naked mouse. He doesn't have immune system. This is done through imitation rather than genetic engineering. Yeah, and the ear on its back is through tissue engineering. A scaffold shaped as an ear was attached to the mouse, and then cells from a patient who, they said it's a kid who was born without an ear, and they wanted to grow an ear for this kid, so they took sample of cells from him and implanted it into the scaffold of the ear, and then put the scaffold of the ear into the mouse, who was like this techno-scientific body, provided the temperature, the blood, the food, everything. What we know is that, like 2 days after this film was shot, the whole structure collapsed on itself. And I don't think there was a kid without an ear. I think it was a PR exercise more than anything that brought tissue engineering into the wider community and actually was partly responsible for our interest in that technology. So we started the Tissue Culture and Art Project. Again, our idea is not to look at the human body but rather to look at the human position within life continuum and our relationship to other living systems around us, the hypocrisies we have to exercise when we with our living environment and when we eat and dress up with animals, and all the changing notion of life and partial life. Okay, so this is very schematic explanation of tissue culture. So you have a biodegradable polymer, you create the shape you want, then you seed it with the appropriate cells. Now there is a hype about stem cells. So you can shape it, you can seed it with stem cells, and then you grow it for a while outside of the body in vitro condition, and then put it back into the body. What we suggested in 1996 is, why do we have to implant it back into the body? And why do we have to keep it in the original shape? It's like, at the beginning about the heart, we thought, okay, we'll take a pump and replace the heart with a pump. Why not create a pump outside of the body and use cardiac cells for that? And why not create sculptures? I hope you are a bit disturbed by now. Because this is also a disturbing image. And I would like to talk, because I'm talking about all those cells that you see in the lab and everything. They all come from animals. And this is actually the first time we entered the lab to start to work with tissue culture. We had, this bag full of heads of rabbits, cute white rabbits. And we had to take cells from the cornea. Those rabbits were dead the night before. They were kept in a fridge. We took the eyes out. We put them in the fridge with antibiotics and cultured them the following day. And they were still alive. So we're not dying quickly, that's for sure. And this is one of our first projects. At the beginning, the aesthetics was very important to us. We did beautiful things. Then we've grown all sorts of examples. I'll just give quickly. The worry dolls on the left, that people could actually whisper their worries to the doll, and hopefully, because she's semi-alive, she will take the worries away. Pig wings, who would never fly. Although all the galleries said, pigs that fly, come over and see the exhibition. And people would come and they would see something really small in nutrient solution. And we devised what we call the aesthetic of disappointment, and it's important for us to contract the hype around that. And an ear, a quarter-size ear of Stella. Oh, and not just artists are very much interested in that, also the military, of course. And you can see on the left, this is like you can call it the modern canary. It's a small bioreactor that is attached to a soldier. And when there is, let's say, chemical or biological weapon, it has liver cells in the bioreactor, and the liver cell can actually detect what's outside. And then the soldier knows either what to take or how much pain he's going to have before he'll die. And this is another techno-scientific body. There are tons and tons of cells grown to create antibodies that are used in pharmaceuticals. This is, for example, from San Francisco, and it's from one hamster. I think there is like a ton of cells from the ovary of one hamster, who's not alive anymore. But his biomass is much bigger. Okay. Okay, I should concentrate now on the topic here, the fashion topic. So I will talk about the victimless project that we've done, or the victimless utopia. The first thing that we thought, the main thing that we have to practice hypocrisy is toward other living system around us is food. I mean, we do eat animals, and the way we do it is that we go usually to the supermarket, so we don't see the animal, and we get this square steak, and that's fine. We remove it away. But we were interested in looking at the idea of actually growing meat without killing an animal, or growing meat for vegetarian. And the way to do it, we thought, is to take a biopsy from an animal that will heal, and you proliferate the cells and grow them for a while, and you can eat it. And we decided to actually do it. So in order to get ethics approval, we had to take a leave from university and go to France and do it and do self-experimentation. And what we do usually in the exhibition that we're doing, because we present in the living or semi-living sculpture, we're not interested in the dead stuff, usually. We have to actually construct a laboratory in the gallery, and you can see here a laboratory that people can peep into and see us working. And we devised the feeding ritual where we care for the sculpture, so we have to feed them every couple of days or so. And by the end of the exhibition, we doing the ritual of killing, when we invite the audience, and the curator invited us, and all the people who are responsible for that, to come and kill the sculpture with us. And that's very easy. You just take it out of the sterile environment, and it has no immune system, so it dies. And we ask people to touch it. So, our hands are very dirty. And that makes the death quicker, less suffering for the cells. So you can see the laboratory that we devised. That was in Nantes in 2003, I believe, this embodied cuisine. So you can see we actually, because it was done in France, we decided to do semi-living frog steaks, because many people find frogs, eating frogs like disgusting, and the French people find eating tissue-engineered meat disgusting. So we put it together. So the frogs are actually shipped like in potato bags from Turkey in airplane. And they're some of them are already there, and they're kept in the fridge, so their metabolism will be very low. And we were in charge of picking 2 frogs that will be alive, or that will be saved. And we pick up 2 frogs. And you can see how well we grown them. We had to live in Nantes for 2 months, which was great fun, because it took 2 months to grow the semi-living steak, and it wasn't enough. And by the end of the 2 months after feeding them for so long, we actually marinated them in Calvados. And we cooked them with lots of honey and garlic, because it has lots of antibiotics. And this is, so it's this size, yeah? And this size, Nouvelle Cuisine. I'll talk about the taste later on. But what I want to say is that, after we've done that, we were approached by two bodies. One was the people for ethical treatment of animal, PETA, in the US, who are quite militant, and usually they don't like artists to work with biology, so we were a bit worried when we got their email. But they actually offered to collaborate with us. And they wanted us to take a biopsy from the leader of the organization, Ingrid Newkirk, and that she'll eat herself. It's like a form of cannibalism. We didn't want to work to do that because we are interested in the relation to animal, and we do agree with many things that PETA advocate for, but the way they advocate is not necessarily the way we believe in the way they advocate it. I think they're too simplistic. And also, tissue culture is used by animal welfare organizations as a way of creating victimless utopia. You don't have to kill animals. Well, let me tell you a secret. Every nutrient for cells needs to use what's called serum, which made out of calf blood. And we did a calculation. For 100 grams of tissue, you need 500 ml of serum from a calf, from one calf. So it means that for every 100 grams of steak, you need to kill 1 calf. But yeah, you don't see it, so it's okay. The other people who approached us were business people. Well, from a university, it's called New Harvest. It's a company who are a spin-off now, are trying to create tissue-engineered meat and they're using the rhetoric of victimless meat, and they use in our project to show a proof of concept that actually there were people, researchers from the University of Western Australia, we're not artists, who grown and ate the meat. And they asked us to estimate how much did it cost us to make the steak. And we reached an estimation of 1 gram will cost $60 American. So I don't think it's food for the third world at all. I think it's extreme Nouveau cuisine. Okay, so this is the victimless leather. It's also quite small because of the problems involved with actually creating a very large tissue engineered construct. And we got an inspiration from Alexis Carril, and we did this perfusion pump, which enabled us actually to not feed the structure for every 2 days, but every week or so. And the first time it was exhibited was in a fashion show called The Space Between. And it was quite interesting because when we were showing our work and doing a presentation, we were criticized for our ethics, while at the same time in the show there were lots of leather as part of the exhibition. So I guess it's kind of a reaction that is not really based on some, I guess, rational argument. But you may disagree with me and you let me know. It's not working. Sorry. I had to move it to another computer. That's actually a video that shows how it works and how the nutrient media is pumping, but I can show it to you later on. I'll just finish by I just found this quote, "Art is like a living organism, better dead than dying," from this book. And I thought, yeah, this is, I mean, everything that, even the living stuff that you show here, you have to kill it in order to touch it. Because, I mean, all that we're growing, you're never able to actually touch, because your touch will kill it. And everything that is alive is basically, by definition, dying. So is art like a living organism, better than dying? I'm not really sure. And in regard to why not growing fur, let's go back to the naked ape. Well, growing hair on a skin is the holy grail of tissue engineering, but it's still not possible. And you can imagine why, if we'll be able to grow fur. I mean, I'm not talking about growing fur on our body, but growing fur on our balding head will be a huge market. Okay, I think I'll finish here. It's probably a bit abrupted, but I would like to acknowledge all those people who helped us.
Big hands, please. Thank you so much for your presentation. I was trying to recall the details, and I have to admit I don't know them anymore. But yeah, you know, I'm really not that deep into the details of the subject you are quite clearly investigating for years. But if I recall it correctly, you also obstructed a patent which was submitted by a research company by doing your act in Nantes. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Actually, it was not recently that we got an email from a Dutch researcher. Yeah, and the first email was kind of half threatening, saying, you know, I have a patent for artificial meat, and it was more questioning, seeing, you know, if we're interested in actually, if we are getting some commercial gain from it. And we didn't know about this patent, I must admit. Because we were researching at the same time, we were growing our first steak at the same time that this patent was probably happening. And then we answered him and said, you know, we are interested more in the social, philosophical application of such technology. not interested in making commercial gain out of it. And he wrote back to us then talking about, yeah, that's great. I'm also interested in creating meat which is non-violent and all the rhetoric surrounding, yeah, the growing, you know, victimless utopia technology that will save us and make us, yeah, a utopian society.
And did it have any effect on his patent application or not?
No, it's quite, I don't think, he never sued us. I mean, he can sue us, but I don't know.
No, he was later than you were, if I recall it
It's
correctly.
a possibility, yeah. We actually, okay. We grown the first stake we grown was while we were research fellows at the Tissue Engineering and Organ Fabrication Laboratory in Harvard Medical School in Boston. There are a few reasons why we've grown it. We came to the idea one was we were very poor and we thought, you know, this will be a viable food. And also, you know, cells are growing and growing and growing, and after a few days you have a whole incubator full of cells that you have basically to kill. And one of the researchers that worked on actually doing tissue engineering procedure in the fetus inside while during pregnancy, she had lots of fetal tissue that grown just so quickly because it's almost like stem cells. And she couldn't throw it away, and she asked us to do something with it. So we decided, you know, beef, we can make some food. And the head of the laboratory was excited. He said, you know, this is not just an art project, you know, it's actually, it can be a commodity, like you can make, it needs to go further than that. And he convinced us to apply for a patent. And it was very, very difficult for us because as artists who are critical on, you know, the way, not so much science, but the way industry and science and biotechnology working together, we said, okay, we'll just put it there and see what will happen. And we applied for the patent through him with other people. And we were naive, and I don't know, we never heard back from them. So I'm not really sure what happened. Yeah, and it's a tough world there in the business world, so I don't know.
Oh, but maybe that turned out to be an ultimate act of cultural activism, who knows?
Oh, definitely, yeah. And what we did with the victimless leather is that we actually decided to publish it and show it as soon as possible, because by that you make it unpatentable, because it's already in the public domain. So, sorry for whoever wanted to patent it.
I want to ask the audience if they have any questions. Okay, then I would like to thank you again and invite Susan here on stage. We will start our final discussion, so please kind of reactivate your brains if they are kind of sleepy by now. And yeah, it would be very nice if the speakers kind of collect around the stage. However, I mean, it won't fit all on the stage, but kind of group here around the stage, that would be good. Just come on here. We move around a bit. That's fine. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. You stay here and I stay there for moving around the microphones. Yeah. So sit on the stage if you want to, and we are passing on the microphone. Yeah. Oh yeah, then we just say goodbye from here and we move on quarter past something. take a seat there. Are you also joining us, Christina? Yeah, she's coming. Do you have all your boxes back?
I think so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah.
Take maybe at the very end. So, thank you for staying with us. I know it's been a very long day, and I think you should be very proud on yourself that you're still able to continue. Susan, I would like you to share some observations or remarks of today.
It's all a bit overwhelming, I think, because there's so many issues that have been raised, and it's a sort of very diverse set of things that it brings to mind. One thing perhaps initially that struck me was something Christina said, and it related to the fact that as artists and designers, we probably steered away from technology and science at school, perhaps because either we weren't good at it or because it scared us or we didn't understand it, ended up at art school and seem to have come full circle now. Most of these people seem to be using science and technology to lead their creative inquiry or critical practice. So that to me I thought was really interesting, because I'm interested in to what extent it's the science and the technology that is leading the artistic inquiry and what the balance is there. At the same time, something Joey said I thought was kind of encapsulated quite a few people's talks, and that was mentioning the idea of intimate memory. And when Anne started off first, her talk was really inspiring, and how she spoke of scenes reminding us that something had taken place and might again take place. The idea of much of this work on some level engaging with memory. So Tekla, for example, talking about the history of a garment revealed through layers. A question that was put to Toby about to what extent the material itself might retain a sense of its origin. So the sort of history and memory that's wrapped up in those things, these kind of traceable layers, I thought was really quite fascinating. Another huge area hasn't really been explored in any great depth is the idea of identity and privacy, certainly, and the ownership of work. And if the product is coming from your body, for example, or even if it's using body data to create a piece of work, how much does it reveal about the person wearing it or the person who created it? I think that's kind of interesting. So who owns it when it may be the product of yourself, but manipulated by someone else? So they were just a few kind of things that kind of occurred to me. But
before we kind of move the microphones into the audience, I would like the speakers also to react on the observations of Susan. She addressed Anne, for example, specifically, and Christine. Toby, I think, as well. Do you have any reactions on this?
I have to say that the first thing that came to mind is that I'm not convinced that there is an original state. So the idea that a cell can remember its purpose seems a bit off to me. Or that it can forget what it really is. I don't believe in essentialism, so I have a very hard time sort of processing that kind of thinking. Actually, I have no idea where I was going with that. Never mind.
maybe you're not.
There's a notion in somatics called somatic amnesia. So this is the idea that the body forgets itself. And this is actually not about forgetting everything about itself. It's that the body has multiple states and multiple intelligences at multiple points in time. And that somatic amnesia is really thought of as not remembering, not necessarily a good thing or not necessarily a bad thing. It doesn't have value to it. It has to do with a body's knowing. And a body can know a lot of crap as well as a lot of, help. You can think of it in many ways. But it really has to do with the kind of a state space of the body. And it's an interesting concept. And actually the way in somatics, the notion of shifting in a process way from somatic amnesia through is actually a direction of attention. And so this notion of using attention and attentionality as a way of shifting knowledge spaces is a very interesting idea. And I think technology can be used in support of some of these explorations, I guess experiments. They're really experiments in a sense with ourselves.
Yeah, Christina, yeah?
What? Okay. I was really going to sort of change the subject a little bit just to react what you said. We can jump back to you guys. But the thing I was thinking about this artist working with technology, the best analogy I can think of is singing. You have people who are trained as opera singers and people who aren't. And for somebody who's trained as an opera singer, it's almost impossible to not use that training once you have it. And in some ways, by having one trained eye onto something like technology. Yeah, fine. Okay. In some ways, having an untrained eye to technology can it not necessarily do better things, but do different things, similar to whether or not your voice has been trained. That would be my sort of image of it. Sorry, that was interrupting what you guys had going on over there.
Sorry, this is still working, okay. But to what extent do you think, how much is the artistic intention creatively pushing the technology, or is the technology saying, okay, well, setting the parameters for what can be achieved? Do you know what I mean about what is the sort of controlling balance there?
Oh, it's working, fantastic. I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, with any medium you're trying to express yourself through, to a certain extent the medium is dictating aspects of it. But not necessarily entirely, particularly if you look at mistakes and glitches and mismatches and some of the scars and seams that Anne was talking about. I think that when technology misbehaves is kind of when it gets interesting. When it ends, that's when you can start moving a bit more freely. But I think Joey wanted to say something.
I mean, I would actually say that it's a continuum, of different methodologies. So it's not, I think it's wrong to contrast technology. And the word technology people use to refer to emerging or current technologies, but it actually refers to everything. Like I mentioned before, cloth, paint, all of these things are technologies, and they were emerging technologies at some point in history. And it's really a continuum of different methodologies. And we have this misconception, I think, of science, so not necessarily engineering, but science as being a very objective kind of pursuit, and that is why we contrast it with an artistic practice. But I do think that is, it's more of a cultural kind of, I don't know, storytelling kind of thing. Yeah.
Did you hear what I was saying? Should I just, yeah? But aren't you missing out on the artistic side of the story? Because she was mentioning, okay, that if technology misbehaves, okay, that's nice. You take a snapshot of it, or if yeah, okay, it does. But error, do you consider error? Yeah, okay. But science works with a proposed hypothesis usually. Yeah, okay. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm asking you.
Yeah, I think.
There's so many value judgments there. I work in a really interesting place in the university. It's called the School of Interactive Arts and Technology. It's a real hybrid school, so there's artists, designers, and technologists and scientists. And the scientists have a value around rationality and objectivity, but I can tell you the processes are irrational. They're absolutely what's the word? The emotionalism in the choices that come out of them. They use a certain kind of branding around rationality, but it has nothing to do with actually what's really going on. So there's a rhetoric that's used because it's so value laden.
Okay, I understand it, but what's then the difference between art and science?
I think maybe what we're talking about here is like the difference between a set of processes or investigations on one hand, which artists or scientists could do, and then on the other hand, an application or kind of like a resolution of some processes. So I think artists can be scientists or scientists can be artists, and they might do essentially the same things, but at the end of the day, it's the output or the kind of like what their process is manifest as, and what audiences that deals with, what the application is, what the product is maybe the distinction.
Yeah, I mean, sorry. I mean, the process, as I can see it, the rigorousness and the way of thinking, and from the hardcore scientists I know, most of what they see and what happens is moments of inspirations, and then there is a sort of a backtracking. Oh my God, you know, I have to dress this up in scientific language, and where the big difference is that, of course, this is, I think, reasonably similar thought process, but playing out in different arenas. And these arenas are, of course, made out of cultures and value judgments and funding and how you get your money and what you're being valued for. But the actual process, the thinking process, I think is very similar.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say as well, that there are a lot of...
Oh, sorry. No, that one. Listen to me now. It's quite interesting. We use a lot the idea of creative, and I think there are, you know, creative people in the science and creative people in the arts, and very artists who are not creative and scientists who are not creative. So, you know, the word creative is problematic. Just as much the word science, there is technology, which is applied science, and art. So, yeah, we have to be aware of that. Now, I'm working within Symbiotica, which is a laboratory within a scientific school, and we're working a lot together with scientists. And at the beginning, there was lots of rhetoric, you know, it's exactly the same. It's about solving a solution to problems, about making sense, all sorts of things like that. And we reached a phenomena when many artists, after doing a bit of, I don't know, genetic engineering, tissue engineering, thought they are scientists. And scientists working with artists who are now thinking they are artists. And that's create a lot of really bad science and bad art. Let me tell you. Yeah.
Do you also want to add something there?
That is what I was going to say. Because if you're talking about science, because you really worry me there, there are a few fundamentals, and I think that if you read something that was written by Mr. Popper a few years ago, something about 100 years ago, I guess, then you see that science has of at least the design of the experiment and the ability to check whether the results of your experiments are true, yes or no, and you can repeat it, yeah, but that is, yeah, but the point that I was hearing was that there was a big mess, and it was, I don't know.
No, let's take dance, for example. I'm just going to use that as an example, because I know a little bit about it. The techniques for learning in dance require that you can reproduce a state in the body every night in a very specific way. There are technical methodologies that you use in order to reproduce that state. There's techniques, and it's repeatable. And it would not work if it wasn't repeatable. Now, that's not science. And this does not devalue the scientific method. But the scientific method is not only objective. There are other things that move into it in terms of how you select the problem, where the problem comes from, how you support the methodology that enables you to get the repeatable results. And yes, it's very important that that actually operate. Just as in dance, there are things that are important that operate. These things are not wrong. I'm just saying that it's not only objective. I think that there's a value in it, and say in dance, there's a value in expressivity, but it's highly objective and highly technical.
I would like to give a slight different twist to the discussion. It's very close, and I think a lot of the presenters and the demonstrators today actually showed work which was in part or totally created in laboratories or different environments as the sole artistic environment or the art studio. And I'm especially for Ionat and Toby, I think, have this question of the effect of moving your work in this environment where you also face the related social and scientific status quo and a very different milieu. I'm actually really interested to hear from you how that's influenced your work, or what happened there. It's not so much about art science, but much more moving your work into an environment, start to collaborate with people in a very different environment with a very different ethos. I'm really curious to hear something about your experience.
Someone once told me, well, you immigrated from one country to the other, so how do you feel about that? And I said, I actually enjoy being sometimes the other, because it gives you an ability to observe, the ability to actually say, well, you know, I'm not implicated, it's them, which is, yeah, you know, I'm a bit ironical. And, but it's also fascinating. I mean, it keeps you on your edge. And also, you do need to make sense in a language that will be understandable to people from other disciplines. I think you talked about jargon and all that. You can't use jargon with scientists. You must find a language that they'll accept and take you seriously, as much as it is interesting to see how their language changes. We see our best interventions actually done in the laboratory and not with the public. I mean, imagine the scientist open the incubator and he sees the worry dolls or pig wings or steaks, you know. Then of course the conversation are changing completely. And there are lots of clashes as well, but that's part of the, I guess, the fun. I mean, collaborations are, you have to be on your toes all the time and to reevaluate. But also there is what's called the slippery slope. And sometimes, you know, it's nice to see new artists coming to Symbiotica, because for me to do tissue culture now, it's like, you know, I'm actually teaching scientists tissue culture now. So I lost the magic, if you want to put it this way.